All right, so the first question is that according to Keast, there's a mystery of sharp contrast between the inertia of prospects and the evangelical zeal of the TiVo users. As an emerging expert in consumer behavior, how would you tackle that mystery? What do you think could be going on? What might the evangelists mention as a cause to the failure to sell the TiVo to their friends? What might a couch potato say in his reluctance to buy TiVo? And what would you expect a top executive at NBC to say about the situation? Well, there are a lot of different things that go along with that. I mean, I think one of the major issues as to why it's had a slower start and had a tougher time getting people on board is it's that same concept of inertia. When you're at rest, you're okay with how things are, but when you're moving and things are churning, and I mean, the TV environment has kind of been pretty stagnant for a good while at that. So people need to really have a good motivator to get out and do something else. The people who have gotten on board and started using their TiVo have really seen the benefit and see that, hey, this is a revolutionary product. And so they want people to look at it and say, hey, this is a good thing. Let's see what we can do. Let's move from here. And the couch potato says, well, hey, look, what I've been doing seems to be working for me. I'm not quite sure why I would need to change anything. I'm happy as I am. And I actually think the top end executives at NBC are probably a little bit nervous because a lot of their revenue comes from advertising. And if they have people have the opportunity to skip the advertisements, not see the commercials, then maybe their advertisers won't put as much money into their business.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I kind of had some similar thoughts with, let me share my screen, or is it going to switch right over? Mm-hmm. But anyways, yeah, I think the idea of momentum and motivation is definitely something that is hindering TiVo from sort of taking off into the mass market, right? You've got a lot of stuff you've got to do. You've got to go to the store. You've got to buy the hardware. You've got to sign up for the subscription. You've got to pay this monthly fee now on top of your already expensive cable and satellite bills. So it takes, a lot of time commitment and a lot of financial commitment for the couch potato or really any user to use this product. And I think also you really need to be a committed TV watcher. And maybe there aren't as many committed TV watchers as there used to be, years ago when sitcoms were a lot more popular and people wanted to get home for their Tuesday or Wednesday night TV show or whatever it might be. But I believe, maybe just through intuition, but generally speaking, that there's maybe a little less committed TV watchers out there. And most of the time, maybe people just want to be able to turn on the TV, see what's on, see the news, and so on, and they're not so committed. You see a lot more of these TV series being played through Netflix and other sort of streaming devices. So just with the growth in technology and the sort of changing dynamics of TV viewers, I think TiVo has kind of found itself in a place where it's a little more niche than expected.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you guys are saying. The only thing I would really have to add, and you kind of touched on it actually, is the I don't know if it switched to me or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It would be the whole Netflix thing. I was actually going to ask the question to you guys. How popular was it when TiVo was coming out to be streaming? Because it would seem like if Netflix was already becoming popular, TiVo coming out would be like an improvement on technology that's already obsolete. So that seemed to make sense to me, but it wasn't mentioned very much in the article. So that's one of the things I would say would be one of the big reasons why they didn't take off. The other thing is TV works as it is, kind of like you guys were saying. So a couch potato who just sits there and watches TV, he uses commercials to go to the bathroom. He uses commercials to go get a snack. You just have to pause your TiVo. It's the same thing, and then you're not paying for it. So there are reasons why TiVo, even though it's obvious now when it's super popular that everyone likes to skip commercials and have it recorded and on demand. But I'd say that's the big reason, one of the big reasons for their slow growth.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I thought the same things. I think at the time, I would take a guess to say that I think in regards to Netflix, I think it was probably, if anything, was probably still doing the mail DVD, and I don't think they'd started the streaming at that point. But it's actually a really good point about, having a new technology that overnight becomes obsolete. And so that could be where things were transitioning. And I kind of thought with the sort of the evangelist sort of idea, is it seemed like it was really kind of touching with a lot of a much smaller group. I think we talked about a niche a little bit. These early adopters, they're a pretty small group already. And so I don't know if there's a whole lot of evangelical space to actually go out and find any more of those people, because they probably already knew about it. And so there might not be a very big group to actually inform who had already heard about it. And so I wondered about that. But then I also wondered about, like, in some of the past most recent lectures, we talked about sort of this gap between where people are currently and where the ideal state could be. And it seemed to me that there wasn't probably a very big gap between where people currently were with their TV watching and, what the sort of proposed state was for something like for TiVo. So I think that could be another one of these issues where, and it's what Nick said earlier, is things were already pretty good with TV watching and nobody was really looking for a way to necessarily improve it. And I think for the couch potato thing, it's the same idea where, that's sort of what they want to do, is they want to surf, they want to look around, they're not trying to make their, TV watching efficient. You're not worried about a time crunch because that's what they're spending their time doing. So I can kind of see them not really caring about improving that period of time other than getting more channels. And that was the interesting thing with TiVo, is it didn't add any more channels. It didn't bring any more service necessarily. It was just a different way to watch TV. And then I agree with the NBC executive. My first thought was, people skipping commercials, that might be a bit of a concern. But I also kind of wondered, if it would actually start adding different ways to actually advertise. So rather than using traditional commercials, there may be a way to actually start looking at, if people are going to skip commercials, how would you actually market to them, and what might the ways that you could do that? I don't have any ideas myself, but I just wondered if maybe, rather than sort of seeing it as the enemy, oftentimes I think people do well when they sort of embrace these changes and really try to have a more of a targeted campaign and try to use the strengths of what they actually see for that.
Yeah, I think those are all really good ideas. I hadn't ever thought of the one of what can you do to embrace this and move forward. That's a really good idea. So our next question was, looking at the data in the case exhibits, what hypotheses get supported and versus what are discounted? What insights do you derive from the data summarized in the text and exhibits that might help guide the growth of TiVo? My thoughts with that is there were quite a few things. One of the biggest things I noticed was that the number of subscribers was steadily growing. So it might be slow in getting traction, but it is picking up. It is taking off. It's just slow in the beginning, which most things start that way. You don't expect to have a big boom overnight. So one thing you need to do with that is, where it is gaining popularity, make sure that you maintain your product, keep it at the top of what it can do. Make sure your service and your product are both substantially performing well. Another thing to pay attention to is with your demographics. It looks like they are roughly staying in the same population groups. You have higher incomes are more likely to buy this. And I think a lot of times with that, the people with the higher incomes are the ones who research the new products, say, hey, I've got the money to experiment on this. Let's see where this goes and see what happens. I think the data also discounted, when you looked at the financials of the company, that TiVo is not in the market really to gain a lot of profit really quickly. They had a pretty continuous loss over the past 8 months it showed us on there. So with that, I mean, subscribership is growing. They may need to reevaluate where their price points are, see what they can do to try to bring their deficit down.
Yeah, I guess the one hypothesis I thought you could immediately discount was the expected number of users and how fast that would grow. Obviously they fell very short of what their target was. So clearly there was either a lack of research or relying too much on intuition when beginning to launch the product. To piggyback on what you're saying, I agree with really working on market penetration of their existing market with their existing users and trying to spread out from there. making sure those customers are satisfied, and then building on referrals. In the data, there was a lot of referrals that led to new customers. There's also a lot of, almost 8%, I believe, had seen some sort of media coverage regarding TiVo before they purchased. So looking at that data, there's some good avenues for them to sort of pursue and focus on for customer growth. And then as well as beginning to look more at the families and the benefit that TiVo can bring to the families, whether it's resolving conflict or allowing better scheduling. There was a lot of benefits that were listed from different relationships within the family unit that TiVo may be able to explore and tie into their marketing going forward.
Yeah, I think so. Just to go real quick, I think the absolute biggest confirmation I saw was that people who, when they do subscribe, they absolutely love it. So whatever they must love about it, they do love it. So I think that's the biggest confirmation. The biggest discount you guys already mentioned about immediate returns. So basically, I guess jumping a little ahead to the next question, I think what they could do is they need to focus on referrals and show off that their current customers are extremely satisfied.
Yeah, so I think that was kind of interesting for me because when I sort of read through, I was kind of expecting, like they had said, this sort of, word of mouth didn't seem to be, carrying what they had actually thought. But most of the data actually showed that, the referrals was really the biggest way that they were actually getting new people. And so if you looked at a lot of the sort of, percent newer, I think they had one of those surveys that had, you had to have been a subscriber for at least 2 months. And, how did you hear about it? And it seemed like there was a lot of family and friends referral and a lot of people they knew. So I thought it was kind of strange, that did seem to be a way a lot of people are hearing about it. But I think it might kind of go back to that idea of early adopters and it being a pretty tight-knit group. So even though you heard about it from a family or a friend, you may have already had it on your radar. And so that wasn't really necessarily allowing them to break into other markets, to get away from just the early adopters and the innovators into that sort of, major adopter kind of cycle where, they needed to sort of get out of those kind of tighter knit networks. And so I think that to me kind of comes with the idea that, they talked about a lot of people had heard about it from store demos and TV, so it wasn't like they were seeing ads on TV or anything like that, but they had seen sort of demos in the store. And that made me kind of think of, some of these early adopters or innovators thinking about sort of just browsing for stuff that they didn't even know they wanted yet. I know I do that. And so I could kind of see how, that group already has this wide gap in regards to what they think the ideal state is versus where they currently are. And so I thought it was kind of interesting to see that, just going to a store that sells this, like a Best Buy, means you might not know what you're looking for, but you're looking for something, and it's something that store has. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well. And then what kind of came from, I think, the data and the surveys was, it didn't seem to me that people were as interested in this organizational aspect. It seemed like when TiVo hit, the idea was it'll organize your life, it'll open you up to new TV shows or, more paid programs, things like that. But it seemed like the features that people really liked was the stop, rewind, and they called it the quick play, kind of thing. And so to me, what that meant was, it's the unexpected interruptions that people really saw this as having huge value. So it wasn't cataloging a whole bunch of movies to watch later or shows to watch. It was, I already know what I want to watch. I know when I want to watch it. I just want to be able to stop when I have some kind of interruption and not miss anything. And they talked about sort of the Super Bowl having sort of some of the greatest sort of users being able to look at, replays and not miss things and that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. They showed the higher education went with the innovator group and the early adopters, which I thought was kind of interesting, just looking at that sort of product adoption model. And I think, like Lance said as well, I thought it was pretty interesting that there was a really strong message that this product had some possibilities to enhance life, people's daily lives, making relationships stronger. It was really kind of interesting, this sort of positive aspect that was kind of coming out from some of those surveys that they had looked at.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to our last question here. So if we could time travel back to the early days of TiVo, what advice would we offer Keist for the research that they should be conducting? And then the type of insight they should be looking for on their outset. I would say with the documentation we have, the first thing is The two major areas where people were purchasing was off of referrals and then off of people who were reading internet reviews and off advertisements off of sites. So my ideas would be maybe see if you could cater your marketing to that. Say, hey, if a lot of people are buying because of referral, maybe offer a referral discount. The person who gives the referral gets some form of a credit. The person who gets the referral as a trial period or something where they get a discounted rate, some aspect to try to incentivize people to say, hey, look, I found this thing that's really cool. I need to help promote this. The other thought I had, where a lot of people were finding it through reviews and different articles written on the internet, I would say if you look at the demographics of the people who were buying, they were largely on tech-related IT forums or also on travel sites. So you have people concerned about, one, new technologies, and two, people who are going to travel and miss their shows. So if you could find a way to have better market penetration through those, find other sites that you could additionally maybe pay for advertising, cut back on some of the others, the radio ads and things that weren't quite making as much impact, and focus on these two specific areas where you can see that's where the majority of your subscribers and purchasers are coming from.
Yes, and I agree. This is kind of a nice question, because hindsight's always 20/20. But obviously, looking at where the sales have come from and how strong their core user group is, I think you would want to spend more time probably doing a little more research in demographics and maybe trying to uncover some of this stuff ahead of time. And then also focusing on probably the family group and highlighting the benefits that the TiVo brings to the family dynamics. And also, as Fred was saying earlier, the in-store demos, the success of those. I mean, I could see a salesperson in there selling the product and really starting to build that ideal state and building that gap between where you are at and where that ideal state is. Because I feel like that is probably a big miss with how it actually did roll out. They assume there was probably more of a gap, or that the gap would be a little easier recognized by their potential customers, and their customers would see more value in it, basically. And basically that value wasn't there just to the naked eye. So getting someone in front of customers to build that value using the demos, I think would be a great avenue for them. And then also another idea I had, which was a little off base from selling this TV service, was also TiVo. I think was probably in a unique spot in the early 2000s to be sort of at the leading edge of data collection on customers. And the example they gave on the Super Bowl about customers rewinding and reviewing the same commercial a number of times and so on. I think there's a lot of data collection that could be valuable to other businesses and whatnot. And I know, Greg, you said you worked in data. I don't know if you have got experience with big data and data brokers and that type of stuff. I don't know anything about it, but it seems like there could be some opportunity there for a company like TiVo, given the timing and the product and so on.
Right. Yeah. So again, more agreement. I agree with everything you guys said. The only thing I really have to add is if we could go back in time and tell him what to research, I just have two things. It'd be to research why your customers like the service and why people who aren't subscribed. So I think what they'd find that people who like the service are using the features, like Fred said, the simpler features, stop and play, more than the features that they're advertising. So they would realize that. They'd say, oh, we're advertising the wrong thing. And then the people who aren't subscribed would show that I forget how you phrased it, the different levels, there's the optimal level of TV watching, and we're kind of already there. The people that aren't subscribed, they don't see that. There's no gap there. So you'd have to push the optimal level higher in order to get them to subscribe. And I think that's what they learned from those two little bits of research.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. I think if I was going to go back there, it's kind of funny to think about a question that says if you could time travel, because I think the whole key to me that I thought was cool about TiVo is that you could control time. And it seemed like the whole point here was, you can stop in real time, you get an interruption. I mean, that's always the issue, where you just missed something that everybody else saw, or you had to get up and answer the door, go to the bathroom, do whatever. And so I do think that's really sort of a powerful aspect. And, you know, when I first kind of read the case study, it seemed like the initial idea with this was it was going to be help you organize, help you sort of, you know, find things that you didn't know. And it was a little more elegant than what I think it really needed to be, which was just that, you know, you can stop TV when you want to stop TV, and you can fast forward, and you can do your own replay. And I thought that was actually something that could really be focused on. And then the other thing I would probably do too, I have two more things. One would be I'd go back and I'd introduce the concept of binge watching, because I think that kind of, like Nick was talking about with Netflix and streaming, you know, I would tell them that, you know, you've got this concept of if you can record and watch it later, well, you could actually record two and watch it later, and you don't have to worry about waiting to find out what happened the next week, or, you know, that kind of thing. So I do think that's something that has really dramatically changed the way that series are done and actually deployed, is people want to watch them all in one shot. They don't want to wait every single week to see something, you know, like we all used to. And then I think the last one is really what I think they could have probably been able to make this a bit wider reaching product, is if they would have focused more on the positive attributes of what what the TiVo device did, which was to be able to bring families together, to be able to watch TV when it's more convenient. You've got kids that go into sports, or you've got parents that are working late, so everybody can still watch their favorite family shows, but they don't have to watch them when they're on every single time. If family night's Saturday morning, well, then you can watch whatever you want to Saturday morning. It doesn't have to be Wednesday night if that's when the TV's on. And I think that's really kind of an interesting concept, because we had that one sort of case study in one of the lectures where they said, you know, here are two different vacations. Which one would you pick? And they picked the one that had more positive attributes. And they said, you know, if you had to eliminate one, which would you eliminate? And at that point, it caused them to focus more on the negative components of each. And so I think by talking about being able to watch more TV, being able to do more efficient TV watching, it may make people think I shouldn't be watching that much TV, and that might soften some of the sales. Whereas if you market it more as this will bring your family together, this will give you better control over the time that you actually have, it may not bring that negative stigma of, you know, becoming a couch potato, you know, which nobody ever really wanted to be called a couch potato. So.
Yeah, I think that we all had some pretty good ideas and insights on that. So I think that pretty well covers what we need to there.
Yeah, absolutely.